Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Scream 7, starring Neve Campbell, Isabel May, Jasmine Savoy Brown, Mason Gooding, Roger Jackson, Anna Camp, Joel McHale, Celeste O'Connor, Sam Reckner, Asia German, McKenna Grace, Matthew Lillard, and Courtney Cox, directed by Kevin Williamson. Now, first of all, welcome back to Scream. After I reviewed the previous movies leading up to 5, and then I came back for 6, so this will be my third time returning to Scream. And I rewatched the movies as of recently, so will they hold up to what they are? And plus, the Melissa Barrera firings and Jenna Ortega deciding not to come back is a bit of a risky choice to make this movie in the first place. And you got protesters hanging out by Paramount Studios at the premiere. So let's see how this goes. Will this be good or bad? Let's get into the movie. The movie opens in Stu Macher's house from the first movie, and a couple named Scott, played by a YouTuber, Jimmy Tatro, and Madison, whom I don't know, go into the house as a rental as Scott wants photographs of the areas and the murders in the house that happened to be in part 1 30 years ago. In part 5, and isn't it funny the original came out 30 years ago before this movie? As Scott loves it while he's a fan of the stab movies, but Madison doesn't like it, as they find a statue of the Ghostface killer from the previous 6 movies, and it scares the shit out of Madison. And it looks where their hands are at, which is motion capture, which isn't creepy and stupid at all, for damn sure. Until Ghostface calls Scott and Madison and asks about horror movies, and suddenly after hanging up, Ghostface calls Madison as Scott scared the dump out of her. And Ghostface suddenly comes to life to kill both Scott and Madison and burns the house down. And the opening told me right away I'm in for a miserable and bumpy time at the movies. We move on to Tatum Evans, named after Rose McGowan in the original movie and played by Isabel May, texting her boyfriend about Ben Brown as he sneaks in from the window until her mother, Sydney, not Prescott, but Evans, returned by Neve Campbell, doesn't like nor trust Ben. And Tatum comes off like a bitch to her mother as she's married to Mark, not Kincaid, but Evans, played by Joel McHale. And the characters are absolutely unlikable throughout, and I don't like any of them at all. Next day comes and Tatum wears Sydney's jacket from college, and they talk about how Tatum is in theater versus things that happen at her school. Meanwhile, Sydney goes to her work at a coffee shop where she serves Lucas and his mother, Jessica Bowden, played by Pitch Perfect's Anna Camp, while serving someone by the name of Carl Gibbs. And Tatum walks to school with Chloe Parker, played by Celeste O'Connor, and Hannah Thurman, played by McKenna Grace, until Ben drives them to theater rehearsals as Tatum missed her cue. And Hannah lets Aaron, who's the stage control manager, give him afraid of her, making him afraid of her. And Tatum takes Ben to the dressing room, and she plays a dog named Fluffy. And the director comes off like a fucking asshole to her, and the acting in this is horrendous, as I can't stand any of this shit. Sydney gets a call from Ghostface, as it turns out it's an AI version of Stu, returned by Matthew Lillard, while he's outside Tatum's high school theater to kill some motherfuckers, while Hannah and Aaron practice the movements until he gets killed off screen. But Hannah gets killed by Ghostface with his fucking knife and cuts her while flying around. And that doesn't wash. And that wasn't effective. And none of these deaths are effective to me. As Sydney arrives and finds Tatum and the cops, led by Mark, doing some investigation on where everyone was at in the high school, which isn't in Woodsboro, California, and that was a questionable move. While the shots looked very bad, Sydney and Tatum try to leave while Mark sticks around to catch the killer, and suddenly the lights go out, and Tatum is sort of captured by Ghostface, and Mark and Sydney fight him off while Sydney taking Tatum to a panic room, I meant panic room, to hide behind the walls until Ghostface finds them there and tries to stop them, but isn't successful, but gets Sydney in the arm. And this action is boring, as all the action in this whole movie, they continue to fight until Gail Weathers, returned by Courtney Cox, along with Mindy Meeks Martin, returned by Jasmine Savoy Brown, and her brother Chad, returned by Mason Gooding, aka Cuba Gooding's Jr.'s son, run the motherfucker's ass over and unmask the fucker. As it turns out, it was Carl, which was too easy, but I get the impression he has an accomplice, which he does, and that was really predictable. And who's the accomplice? My money's on, what's her name? Jessica. Gail interrogates Lucas while Jessica is there and joins the family in the house with Mindy and Chad, and the dialogue is absolutely terribly written as Stu calls Sydney and Gail and threatens to kill them off as the next day comes and Tatum wants to join her mother into fighting Ghostface, and Sydney and Gail go to a mental hospital to discover Carl's file, and Stu was disguised as a man named John Doe, which felt way too goddamn obvious, as this movie is way too motherfucking obvious. Tatum becomes sick of being useless and wants to help Sydney and Mark find the killer amongst her friends, and while in a curfew, as Sydney and Gail decide to get an interview for the first time ever, which is something Gail asks Sydney for 30 years in order to get Stu to call Sydney while being on the TV, and she finally gets one, and Gail goes too far in the interview and ends the interview there. Meanwhile, Mark gets stabbed multiple times by Ghostface as Chloe makes everyone meet at the pizza place in which she works at with Mindy and Chad and talk about who the suspects are and make Stu look real again as Ben tries to steal his face from the computer. And I honestly don't know what the fuck I was watching at this point, and I can't believe what I saw at this point in time. Sydney hears Tatum and at Chloe's restaurant, thanks to Stu, and Tatum is led to believe Ben is the AI Stu and runs away from him while Mindy and Chad go look for Tatum and is stuck on the inside while Chloe is being encountered by and attacked by Ghostface. And at one point, Chad and Mindy get sliced in ways they'll be alive at the end of the movie. But Chloe is killed by Ghostface, as is Lucas, and I could care less about any of this shit whatsoever. And the way he died, it makes me think it's Jessica, which feels questionable, which will be answered at the end with her monologue, which I'm not going to talk about because that's stupid. And her explanation is stupid enough as it is, and which I could care less for. Ben is killed and Tatum hides in the coffee shop Sydney owns, in which I didn't realize she owned the coffee shop, and Sydney calls Tatum to tell her to go to the office while Ghostface has the code. And how the fuck is that possible? As that bothered me. And Sydney has the gun inside the safe and tells her to shoot him in the head and by the camera on her phone because she can't be there with her in person, and Tatum tries to aim for Ghostface's head, but misses big time, but does get him in the arm, but gets up, and Tatum doesn't get away, but gets captured by. And this is a mess of a movie to a point I can't believe it. Sydney gets to the house and finds Stu, Billy Loomis's mother, and Sydney's brother, and Dewey returned briefly by David Arquette, and they get to Tatum in the backyard, and as Carl unmasks himself as this Jessica, who brings Mark's body, which felt too goddamn obvious that she was the Ghostface killer. And I've heard her play villains before, but this is the first time I've ever seen her as a villain, which felt too obviously telegraphed. It wasn't very funny. And she monologues and why she did it with Carl and explains every single thing. And Mark releases Tatum as she calls an ambulance, while Sydney looks for Jessica with her gun as they fight it off until Jessica is killed by being shot in the head multiple times. Mark gets to the hospital. Gail, Mindy, and Chad get to the crime scene, with Gail taking Sydney and Tatum to the hospital after Sydney telling Tatum the reason why she named her after her friend being the strong woman she was in the first movie. While Mindy does the news and Chad carries the camera and laughs at her, and the climax was just pretentious. But how pretentious was this movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 2.3 out of 10. This movie isn't creepy, but it's stupid for damn sure, as the opening scene told me right away I'm in for a miserable and bumpy time at the movies, which is this whole movie was, and the characters are absolutely unlikable throughout, as I don't like any of them at all, and the acting in this is horrendous, as I can't stand any of this shit. None of the deaths were affected to me, and the fact that this isn't a Woodsboro is a little questionable, while the shots looked very bad throughout the movie. And the action scenes were just boring in the whole movie, which is absolutely predictable. I knew Anna Camp being the killer, as it was so obviously telegraphed it wasn't funny. As the dialogue is terribly written, the whole goddamn movie is way too motherfucking obvious, as this is the second worst of the series, with part 3 being the worst of any of them, which is a solid non-recommendation for the movie, as I don't know what the fuck I saw on screen both times I saw this movie. And I could care so little about this movie whatsoever. And this is a mess of a movie, to the point I can't believe it, as this is, like I said, the second worst Scream movie behind the third movie. It's that fucking pretentious. So I'd like to thank you guys for returning to Scream. And until, if we ever get an A, which rumor has it they're making it, what's your favorite scary movie?